I wanted to ask the Minister at the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, Michelle O'Neill, about how lax the system appeared to be. She wasn't available, but the department did put forward the Chief Veterinary Officer.
The controls at the port was the head count versus the passport. That was it. The horses weren't unloaded. There's no place to unload the horses in Belfast.
No, and it wouldn't have been safe for either the personnel or the horses for them to be unloaded in that way. So we did what we were able to do, and that was the best we could do.
But it just wasn't good enough.
Well, I'm sorry, you say it's not good, just not good enough. What I'm saying is that we are looking at all of the ways that we might harden the resistance of the system to the abuse.
It's too late.
Well, it's never too late to harden the system.
The horses are gone. They may have entered the food chain.
Well, we don't know where the horses went, because they were consigned to England.
Dard may not have been aware of a major problem at the ports, but by now others certainly were.
We began to notice that there were certain individuals using the ports on a very regular basis, sometimes 3 and 4 times a week, taking horses out of this country, and we just couldn't understand why. It just didn't make any sense. You know, why on earth would people be spending money moving animals that had no value?
The USPCA decided to mount a surveillance operation. It began with this man, Lawrence McAllister, a horse trader from County Antrim, who was making repeated trips to the north of England with trailer loads of Irish horses. And when he was arrested after driving off a ferry in Scotland, the team had their first major breakthrough.
He decided to transport animals that were unfit for transport. The animals were suffering, they were lame, they couldn't stand on the lorry. And they impounded that lorry, and during that impoundment process they discovered in the cab of the lorry 40 forged Irish horse passports and a box of microchips, and that started to shed some light onto what was really happening to the Irish horses.
But our insider says that McAllister was part of a much wider criminal enterprise. In fact, he was one of the ringleaders in the gang our insider worked for, delivering horses to England that were not fit for human consumption.
He would have been one of them top men.
What do you mean?
He'd have been in that big gang. So he would.
Was he taking horses from... Was he driving the horses from Dublin or from Belfast?
As far as I knew, he'd been taking them out through the north, out through Belfast.
Lawrence McAllister was charged with animal cruelty and, as part of his bail conditions, told not to work with horses. He didn't listen. He was later stopped as a passenger in this lorry in Scotland, carrying 2 horses. The vehicle was driven by this man, Kieran Murphy from South Armagh. But Murphy and McAllister were not just transporting horses. Hidden in the back of the lorry was a large amount of cannabis. Murphy and McAllister are now in prison in Scotland. McAllister was also convicted of animal cruelty arising from the charges on his previous trip to Scotland.
Lawrence McAllister was caught in Scotland with drugs. Were you surprised?
No. Had to do something with all the money, so I suppose that's one way of doing it.
The conviction of the 2 men in Scotland shows how the conspiracy was now embracing other forms of criminality. But it also helped solve a riddle for the USPCA investigators. Why were so many low-value horses being moved to England? The answer lay in some of the items McAllister had in his lorry the first time he was arrested. Fake passports and a bag of microchips. Now the investigators were able to join the dots and work out that the gang were passing undocumented animals off as animals that were fit for human consumption. The big concern was where those animals were heading.